I hate to tell you all, I looked at that music. There's 4 lines of words all starting at different places, and they figure it all out every single week. So God bless you. All right, well, listen, I'm going to be all over the map today just because I'm all over the map. This is just what it is. Okay, first thing we want to talk about, the nature of goodness is everywhere, at all times, and in all places. You'll notice that in the second reading today from 1 John, it says, "The message we heard from him and proclaimed to you that God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all." In the early church, they talked about the light a lot because how do you envision God is the question, and his presence. The way they did it fundamentally, and the way we sometimes do it today, is by thinking about the light of the sun. Now, sometime later today, you are all going to be outside in the sun. I don't know who's going to be the first of the season, but one of you will be. Oh, I'm sweaty and hot. They called it the radiance of goodness, the radiance of the sun. And when John was writing to his congregation, he was simply pointing out that the radiance of the sun, and you spell it either S-U-N or S-O-N, all right, you got the metaphor there, is present in and around and underneath, and it is everywhere present at all times. And that it always radiates outward from the source, God, to us. Now, the radiation, of course, as it warms us up and warms up our lives, also means that we are beneficiaries of all of those good gifts of what radiates out from God, which is love, beauty, truth, justice, wisdom. Those good gifts radiate outward and are present and available to us. And because of that, we also know the source of those gifts. So that any goal that you have as a human being, as a liver and a lover of life, should be to be in constant touch with the source of your strength, the source of your life, the source of the way in which you look and see things. There's things in our day, of course, which naturally will get in the way. What's the technological ideal today? Now, this you just have to know, and if you don't know it, you should know it. What is the goal and purpose of work today? Yeah, to pay bills, survive. Okay, let me put it a little more formally for you, academically. The technocrat ideal is a person with no commitment to the future, with no point of view, and with plenty of marketable skills. That's called values-free living. It's wonderful, because if you enter life and maintain a life of no values, a life with no strongly held commitments, but with plenty of marketable skills, you will most assuredly make a good living and will most assuredly rise up in the ranks. But you most assuredly will also diminish not only your own humanity, but the humanity of all of the people for whom you work. I was talking to somebody a few weeks ago in our congregation who's working at a small store, food and coffee, and she was saying she was having a day, I guess, and she came over to the office late in the afternoon after her shift and said, "My boss is a screamer." That's all she does. She screams at everybody all the time. It makes everybody nervous. And you know what happens? I said, "No, what happens?" "I know what happens, and so do you. People start making mistakes. When they're making a latte, they don't put enough ice in, or they don't put enough milk in, or they don't put enough shots of schmutz in." I'm not sure what the schmutz is called, but you get the idea, that thing that you push. The screaming is useless, because all it does is make everybody upset. Does she scream at you? No. Why? Well, I'm in the back. I'm making the sandwiches. And if she comes back and says, hurry up, all I do is point to the ovens and say, hey, they're pre-programmed. And this is how long it takes for the sandwich to be done well. So no. So I said, so what do you do with your time in that place? I'm just quiet. I mind my business. And I phrased it a different way. So you're maintaining a calm presence in a chaotic place. Yeah. And I said, that is how you practice the radiance of your faith. Yeah, she looked at me like I had two heads when I said the radiance of faith. So, of course, you put it a little different way. You practice your faith daily by being kind and good to your neighbor, even at work, and maintain a calm presence, because it is that impact which will be greater on that small business than the screaming and the shouting. You've all had that sort of experience where your faith is tested in a variety of ways. I was looking up buffalo the other day. Not the city of Buffalo, but buffalo, like furry buffalo. I'm not sure why. I just did. I was curious about something I had seen on a documentary. I didn't know if it was true or not. But buffalo, when there is a storm in the high plains, they walk into the storm. Now just watch. They walk into the storm, and then they're through the storm. The cattle on the cattle ranches, on the other hand, walk with the storm to try to escape it. So the storm is coming, and they're going in the same direction and stay in the storm longer. And the loss of cattle in the high plains is much greater than buffalo, because the buffalo walk into the storm. Take that as a metaphor for handling your life and stuff that has to be handled. You do it fast, efficient, and immediately, and you don't screw around. That is why I was looking up the buffalo. And the whole notion of what was going on with Thomas and Jesus when he was questioning whether Jesus was real or not, Jesus met him head on. No? He went there specifically to meet him head on, recognizing that he was not going to be a believer just hearing it from other people. He needed to have some visible facts. I'm not sure that what I would do if Jesus were here and he said, here, put your finger in my hand. Some of you would do that, I take it, just because you're curious. Some of you might even put your fingers up in the spear wound just out of curiosity to see if it was real or not. And Thomas was just one of those guys that just needed proof that faith was real. As he was talking, doing that, his faith was in its own way being tested. Thomas's was. And so Jesus met the test of his faith in that fashion, but there are other ways that faith is tested. You get tested by faith, your faith gets tested oftentimes, as everybody's does, by doubt. Does God really love me? Does God really care? You can think about it in terms of hunger. Maybe that's one of your issues that you just don't understand. How can God love the world when there's so much wealth in the world and there's so many people who are literally starving? I mean, if God cares, why doesn't he fix that? There are so many wars in the world, so many innocents dying. Why doesn't he fix that? There are plenty of things around the world and closer to home, like that young lady, in her understanding of things. You know, how come God doesn't make everybody nice? Well, that is a good question, is it not? Here's the trick for your doubt when it comes, is the times and occasions when you're a miserable wretch. and ask the question, why am I a miserable wretch? Why am I a horrible person in this moment? Why did I say that? Why couldn't I just shut up and mind my business? It causes you to doubt not only yourself, but your relationships and the love that God has for you. How could he possibly love a miserable person like me? Now, what that doubt does is to cause you to reflect on your life and on the meaning of stuff. It causes you to think about who you are as a human being and whether you are truly a human being who is radiating the light, the goodness of God. Because you always have choices in your different circumstances as to what you're going to radiate, no? I mean, I can walk into a room and you'll know in a hot second if I'm in a lousy mood, right? Because I will usually let you know. But I've learned to say it out loud. Because what I'm fully expecting from you is what you fully expect from me. Some kind of care to ask the question, what's going on? That's what the early Christians did, by the way, back in Acts 4, when they gathered together. It was for mutual upbuilding and mutual healing. That's what they did. And that is how you handle doubt, and the doubts in your life, and the doubts as to how much God does in fact love you and love the world. So when you think about hunger and war and your own workplace and things like that, the doubts that begin to emerge, it is then that you have to yourself radiate outward. Because you know as well as I do, so long as you don't watch Fox News and MSNBC and MSNBC, they're not news stations, they're opinion stations. And they're designed specifically, now hear this, they're designed specifically to tap your fear button. Because after an hour of that, you know you're going to be worked up, you're going to be looking for somebody to blame, you're going to be cussing out somebody, and it has tapped your fear, your fundamental fear of being a human being, that you might lose it somehow. And every issue, of course, is a crisis, the end of times crisis. Always, every issue. What did Jesus say to the disciples, who, by the way, were threatened by crisis of annihilation by the Romans in the upper room? A few times he would come and say to them, don't be afraid. In our lesson today, he says, peace be with you. In other words, chill. Relax. I'm in charge. And that's how that works. God's in charge, always. And it is doubt that will cause you to ask that question, which is what you should be doing when confronted with different circumstances of life. Asking that question. Now, I must tell you that Father John the Short, he was one of the desert fathers of the 4th century, Father John the Short was. He said this about doubt, that when your heart is tranquil, and our hearts do get tranquil, right? Sometimes you realize, of course, that 95% of the world goes beautifully well and runs nicely. And the only things we see on TV are the yuck. You do understand that, I hope. Okay. Father John the Short, realizing that, since he lived in the desert and it was pretty tranquil there, said this, when your heart is tranquil, go ask the Lord to stir a new war within you. Fighting doubt is good for the soul. So that in a disciplined fashion, what he would do was to pick out a particular issue or something that was on his mind and just wrestle with that and try to work it through and try to understand the dynamics of what sin was doing in terms of plundering life. You know as well as I do that there's not a reason in the world that we can't feed everybody in the entire world. Right? You do know that. Okay. Yeah. However, you can also come up with 10 reasons, just like I can, the economy, etc., war between nations, mistrust. You can come up with a zillion reasons why it's never going to work. However, that's what John the Short was saying. Wrestle it out and think it through, and think like a Christian through the eyes of God who radiates his love outward, and figure out how that can work. Faith is the master. That's what Martin Luther always said. Faith is the master. Our brains and our doubts are the servants of life. And let me finish with Dag Hammarskjöld. He was one of the first heads of the United Nations. Regardless of what you think about it, this was a man, as I said earlier to you about technocrats, technology. They really appreciate people who have no goals and no values and lots of education. Because that anything is okay. Dag Hammarskjöld had that already in the 1950s as the whole technology movement was moving along. He said this: I don't know who or what put the question. I don't know when it was part of me. I don't even remember answering. But at some moment in my life, I did answer yes to someone or something. My life in self-surrender had a goal. And what he did with his life was to travel around to all different parts of the world, trying to bring peace where there was war, trying to feed people who were hungry, who were starving, and get rich countries to pass some food along, medical supplies and all of that. That was the way in which he understood self-surrender. He was self-surrendering his own stupidity, his own love of technology, to humanity. And it is that which Jesus did with Thomas. He recognized his humanity and gave it the full flavor of his love. And that is the real issue for us. I take it that you saw on the news stations, and yes, I saw it on one of those two stations, and the way it was presented had me a crazy man. They're now working with robots, and they're starting to use those robots that wheel around, mostly in hardware stores now. Anybody else see that? Very interesting. And so now if you need a 10-penny nail, you can go to the robot, punch in 10-penny nail, and it will take you to the 10-penny nail. Now, if you are a technocrat with no values and no goals for the future, you'll say, that's fabulous. However, if you're a Christian who recognizes that all people are created in the image of God and have value and authenticity and integrity in their own right, you're going to look at that technology and say, that's taken some jobs away. It's taking human authenticity away, in which work has value in the Bible and in faith. And you're going to then begin to doubt your own culture. And that's the exploration, what John the Short was saying. Begin to explore it and wrestle it. Not everything that's invented, not everything that occurs, not everything that we do is good, wholesome, or upbuilding. A lot of what happens in our lives does not radiate goodness outward, as the sun will radiate its warmth out on you later today. But you see why Jesus started the church, because that's our particular calling, to radiate his goodness outward. And sometimes that means asking some hard questions about what it is that makes us in the image of God and what that means. Amen.